What's up, everyone? It is Casey with the Parisi Speed School. I am joined today by, I think this is our first time ever really talking digitally face to face, Allison, but I'm joined by Allison Maurer. I'm going to let Allison do her introduction because anytime I've done these, if you've listened to past episodes, I don't do a very good job. So, Allison, if you could just give us an introduction of who, what, when, where, how, the gist of you, we'll start there.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Casey, for having me. So Allison Maurer, I am a registered dietitian, specialized in sports nutrition, been in the profession for, over 17 years now. Started off way back in the old days in 2004. I was at the University of Colorado in Boulder, where I was the sports dietitian and an assistant strength and conditioning coach. It's kind of where I cut my teeth in the strength and conditioning world. From there, I went to the University of Tennessee, where I was the sports dietitian there for about 9 years. After that, I was at the Pittsburgh Pirates as the director of sports nutrition and fueling for 5 seasons. And currently, I am associate athletic director for student health and wellness at Knoxville Catholic High School here in Knoxville, Tennessee. So that's the nutshell, the Cliff Notes version.
That is what the director of fueling. That's super
sports
badass. Nutrition
and fueling. I know.
Badass. That's super awesome. Because and I'm sure you've definitely seen this, but when you in the Parisi land, we work with a lot of high school athletes, and they start talking about just different professions to stay involved with sports, and maybe they realize that they're not going to go professionally. I'm from Northern Vermont, so I don't think we've ever actually. I don't think anyone has been born in Vermont and played professional sports. I don't know. I'll have to look that up. I don't know. That's my stat. But either way, we don't have a lot of pros coming out of Northern Vermont. So they always ask how they can stay involved with sports, and nutrition, dietetics has always come up. And, being a registered dietitian, that's okay. But being the director of sports fueling, that's super badass. So I love that. I love that title. And Allison, we met through the Parisi Sports Performance Mentorship. You just wrapped that up. We did 2 a year. We did wrap that one up. And I love the diverse backgrounds that we get when it comes to our coaching, which is how we kind of connected, just so people know. And I'm going to now segue completely from there, because this is a question that gets brought up in the Parisi network a lot. And I would be really curious to hear how your experience was. And I'm sure you've gotten this before from your kids, but how did you get involved with pro sports?
So just in general, so sports nutrition is really young.
Super.
2000 is kind of when people actually started to think about it. But even when I started at the University of Colorado, it was like sports nutrition wasn't a real job. And so I was one of the first 8 full-time collegiate sports dietitians in the country. And so I'm just old. So that's how better way to put it. That's how I got involved in professional sports, because, when organizations are looking for those of us who've been in it for a long time, there's not that many of us. So
that's so wild. It is. Even if you think strength and conditioning, there's been personal trainers and stuff like that. But when you think of commercial strength conditioning outside of college, same thing, 2000s, late 90s maybe is really when it became a job, and
right. And
not a real job to many.
Yeah, totally. And I remember when I was at Colorado, even females in strength and conditioning, going to the CSCS conference, and it was the female strength coaches breakfast, and there was 30 of us in there. And now there's 200, last time I went, there was so many. So so when you think strength and conditioning and nutrition, they're both really in their infancy, really still.
Were you ever involved? How involved were you with the strength conditioning? We can talk about at the school you're at now, or with the Pirates, whatever it was, Colorado, but and it's maybe a good segue from getting involved with pro sports to how involved you were with the strength conditioning and how those two pieces really tied together for you.
Yeah. So when I was at Colorado, it was one of those things where they needed a strength and conditioning coach, an assistant, but they wanted a dietitian as well. And I literally had never lifted weights in my life. And they were like, hey, do you want this? You have the qualifications for one half of the job, but not the other half. But if you're willing to learn and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's literally, I was on the job training. So everyone, and back then too, collegiate programs, there was, I think there was 5 of us. There was the director and then there was 4 assistants for a whole program. Like we didn't have GAs, we didn't have interns. And so I was an assistant with football because we all were. And then I had women's tennis, men's and women's golf. I did cheer and dance. And those were really great teams for me to like really learn and get familiar with strength and conditioning. And so I trained basically for a year and then sat and took the CSCS exam. So yeah, I mean, it was like, here's your teams. There you go. So yeah. And then I didn't do any strength and conditioning at Tennessee. The Pirates did like the fact that I had that as a background, just to kind of have another set of eyes and ears, like if there was anything, that I observed, but I didn't do any strength and conditioning at the Pirates. I dabbled, like I worked with a high school basketball team for a preseason and, did their strength and conditioning program for, I think that was 2018 or something like that. So I was always in and out of it. I always wanted to stay as up to date as I possibly could. But then now my role is, I'm kind of back to where I was at Colorado, where I'm full-time dietitian, full-time strength coach. So I'm in the grind a lot now again.
So this might sound like an obvious duh question, but knowing what you know now and having done roles where you were coaching on the weight room floor and also, I'll say like in the kitchen with the athletes as well, and doing both, and then obviously doing isolated pieces of both. Would you say is it like in your mind and in your experience, like, would you say it's a strong recommendation, if not like a required piece of continuing education for someone who wants to get into sports nutrition to become like a certified trainer or have the performance coaching background? Like, how important is it, like in your experience?
Yeah. And I've gotten this question a lot. And the thing that I always tell people is, if you're not going to actually do it, then don't get the certification. Like, don't get the letters behind your name just because you hope it's going to get you a job. Like, if you're going to actually spend the time studying, like learn under someone, be mentored, like learn all about it. Don't just get the CSCS or whatever personal training certification or whatever you want just because you think it's going to help you get a job. Because if I never did strength and conditioning, I wouldn't have gotten the certification just to say that I had it. I don't think it's not make or break by any stretch of the imagination.
I think that's important to understand. I know when you look at, and I personally have done this because I once upon a time was like, oh, pro sports, like, it would be sweet. And then you look at the strength conditioning coaches in pro sports, any sport, and they're typically physical therapists, also licensed athletic trainers or chiros, or they're like, and you were a great example, like you wear multiple hats. And I don't necessarily know why, because you would feel like in pro sports, they have a lot of resources, a lot of capacity, but then you look at like their sports med staff, and in 2021 into going into 2022, it's not necessarily like this anymore, but it is wild how you look and it's like, whoa, there's all those letters, or whoa, this person was like a surgeon and now they're a strength coach. Like, why are they a strength coach for this basketball team? And I think that a lot of younger people would look at that and say, like, I need to get everything to be everything to try to get this job. But it is refreshing to hear from someone who's done it that it's not necessarily required.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because I've had some of my high school students, they're like, oh, I want to be a director, like a football strength coach in the NFL. I'm like, hey, guess what? There's 32 of them in the whole country. Yeah. You're probably not going to be one.
It's even harder to do that than play in pro sports, probably.
Exactly. So just because they see the big paycheck and they see how cool it is on the sidelines on, Sundays or Monday Night Football. And I'm like, there's 32 in the nation. Mm-hmm. And I hate to be so like in their face, but I'm like, you're going to have to be an intern for so many years. And then you're probably not going to get paid very much. And then you got to latch on to a specific coach and like, maybe you could be, but it's not as easy as just seeing the fun stuff.
Right. And I mean, you probably know this. So, when you were, even at the college setting or with the Pirates or where you're at now, like, I don't know how much diversity is in your day-to-day or seasonality that's in your like actual in the trenches life cycle or work schedule, but like for someone who's in sports nutrition, what does a typical day look like and you can pick, I'm sure it changes with the season. So maybe like during the summer and then, school is in session or if you've ever dabbled like outside of the school with different clients or anything like that, how that might differ. It would be really interesting to kind of pull that curtain back for people listening to this.
Yeah, it's so different from the collegiate to the professional to the high school level. Collegiate, it's better now. Most programs have multiple dietitians on staff, but back in the day where it was like, table for one over here, you go from football season and then men's and women's basketball start right in the middle of football season. And then as soon as football season's done, everybody's like, oh, aren't you glad football season's over? And I'm like, no, because now it's off season and now my work just got harder.
Yeah.
Plus we still have men's and women's basketball, and not to mention like the swimming and the volleyball and golf and tennis. And so it never stops. And it's anything from team talks to individual sessions, eating disorder counseling, planning menus, like all kinds of stuff. Professional sports, it definitely was better because you had an off season. Baseball, you're hoping to play in November, but most of us don't get to. And so, you have a decent off season where you're checking in with players, guys get surgery, they're trying to, hit their weight and body composition goals, recovery, stuff like that during the off season. And then you're going from February through, the end of September, like it's game on. So it's pretty busy. And, I traveled, and then I traveled some in 2018, 2019, and then 2020, that was just a crazy year. So we were all kind of just in the bubble, and that's where because we had to, it was just out of necessity. And so, but yeah, anything from one of the cool things in pro sports is it's more fine tuning, right? It's not necessarily teaching the guys like, here's what a carbohydrate does, and here's how protein helps with muscle repair and that sort of thing. It's more like, all right, you're starting pitcher. So after you get off the field, you start doing your arm care recovery. Here's your recovery shake that has cherry juice, branched chain amino acids, some collagen. You get to be more sciencey and more in depth about things. And then obviously too, you have your medical nutrition component where you have athletes with celiac disease or Crohn's or any other medical issues. You have staff that you're helping, with their dietary needs and that sort of thing. So that was the difference in pro sports. And then high school, it's all day. So I teach 3 sports nutrition classes. So that, and I really, really love that because I get to teach them every day, like what they need to do every day. And then I have girls weight training class. So teaching them, just about how, and it's mostly beginners. So just the basics of movement and being in the weight room and getting comfortable in there. And then after school, like yesterday we did speed work, and I had a soccer girl, a few, football players, baseball, doing that. Or it'll be girls basketball workouts, so it's all day. Like at lunch is usually when I'll try to catch up with kids who need to do one-on-ones. And so, I'm not there just for the student athletes at the school. I'm there for all the students. So, we've had
a lot of students.
Yeah. Well, but luckily the high school is about 600 kids, and we actually have 2 registered dietitians full time.
Oh,
so
wow.
I know, isn't that cool?
Well, it just shows you it's a priority, and that's huge.
Yes, it's a huge priority. So yeah, so between her and I we'll take kids through, like at the beginning of basketball season and stuff, the girls were like, will you help us, go through the line and pick out the foods that we should eat? And so, then the other kids see it and they're like, oh, I want you to tell me what I should be eating, and so it's just like, they're all just really excited to have the resources there. And then just getting them excited about being in the weight room, really creating what a true strength and conditioning program should look like. And how it is, because at the high school level, you may have really qualified individuals or you just may not. You just never know what you're getting. And so
no offense to the high school chemistry teacher, but sometimes they're very nice to offer their time, but their wisdom is few and far between.
Yeah. Yeah. And they mean well, and they're, doing what they remember they did when they were playing high school,
whatever. Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah. And you're like, I don't really think that's safe.
Yeah. That was cool in 1984, but not so much in 2021.
Yeah. But it's been to hear the kids, like some of the things that has been really exciting just at the high school level is like, even with supplements, it's like, hey, I was going to go buy this, but I thought I'd ask you first.
Huge.
And yeah. And I've noticed that it didn't have that NSF certified for sport logo. So I wanted to just double check. Like those things are just, it blows my mind because I'm like, those are the moments I want. Like that's the stuff that I want those kids to go into stores and talk to people about and be like, I'm going to actually ask a few questions before I'm going to jump on that. So
that's a really good point. It segues into one of my favorite things to talk to registered dietitians about, because I think we've all gotten to the point, athletes, or general adults, like it's not necessarily good food and bad food, right? Like always remember this, like you can talk to like I have a 3-year-old and I could be like, which do you think is more healthy for you? This plate of broccoli or this box of Little Debbie's? And she would be able to point and say the broccoli. Like everyone kind of knows like what's perceived as healthy or more nutritionally dense. Yeah, nutritious.
Yeah, there you go.
Versus like chocolate cake, which I'm not against chocolate cake. I love me some ice cream and cosmic brownies from the Little Debbie box, but there's always a time and place for everything. And that's absolutely what's important. But when you're educating people on nutrition, because this is where I know in Parisi land, like we talk to parents and they're always like, hey, like, can you talk to nutrition about my kid? Like, what do we recommend for this, that, and the other thing? And I think parents think you're just going to tell them like, eat this and not that. But it always comes down to like the actual behavior surrounding it. And like, it's really complex. Like people don't really understand. And even fitness in a way has kind of gotten to this point where there's like a lot that goes on behind the curtains and then between the ears I don't say complying, but like people's like emotional backgrounds around exercise and like why it's important and how they go about doing it. And nutrition is even more, because food is so much more than, it's comfort. It's parts of people's religion. And there's so much that goes into it. But a lot of times when it comes to athletes, it's like, do this, eat this, you guys need this, that, and the other thing. And at what point in your experience does it just go past good food, bad food? Does that make sense? Yeah. I don't know if there's a question there you can pull out, but it's much more than that, right?
I think I know where you're going with this. Yeah. And so, and you're so right. Like, kids are all about the social media. And so all the people that they watch on social media are so extreme usually. And so they perceive that as like, you have to either do it all right or it's all wrong. And so my philosophy, so obviously my philosophy is food first, but I also talk to them it's about fueling. It is not even about healthy food or unhealthy food. We're going to talk fueling. I don't care if you have a big test coming up. I don't care if you have like the biggest sports performance of your life, but we're going to talk about fueling and honestly, just like respecting food too. Like using it to your benefit, not just because you feel like you have to eat something or you don't feel like making your own sandwich. So you stop at, the fast food joint or whatever. But, and one of the things too, I try to teach them is like 80-20. Like I'm not going to give you this meal plan that writes out and calculates your exact day, because nobody lives like that. Nobody lives in an exact meal plan. So if you can do well, fuel well 80% of the time, knowing that 20% is going to be like, you know what, we're going to go get pizza as a team after the game, or it's my mom's birthday and we're going to go out and get ice cream. Like knowing that and helping them to understand, like, just it's not perfect. The people that they see on social media aren't doing it perfectly either. It's just they post about what looks the best for them. And so right. I think that too helps get them to relax a little bit, because I think when they come to class, they assume I'm going to tell them, eat this, don't eat that. That is bad. That is good. And I do not roll like that, because I'll be the first one to be like, all right, when you guys go trick-or-treating this year, whoever brings me the Reese's peanut butter cups gets 5 extra credit points.
Because that is the goat of actual Halloween candy. Peanut butter and chocolate, like we can go on a quick little segue on this, is probably the best combination you can have. It's
Yeah.
like, name a better combo? Peanut butter and
I
jelly,
know.
maybe, but like, anyway.
Chocolate, definitely.
Yeah, chocolate and peanut butter. It's the best. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it like catches them off guard completely that like I'm going to eat sweets because I love them, but I also know that like I can make sure the rest of my day is going to be pretty balanced. And so, I think that's huge because I'm a distance runner. And so, they see what I do when I work out and then they see how I'm eating and they're like, oh, it's not perfect. And it's not always going to be the way that it's, written out if I Google sample meal plans, Google image. Like people get, if I had a nickel for every time I told someone I don't do meal plans and their response was, well, then what do you do? You know what I mean? I'm going to teach you how to have a really good relationship with food. And
Huge.
We're going to learn how to perform well and to fuel well. And, for girls too, like, and this is what I always tell them in class, when you think healthy eating, what do you think? And I said, I think it's being on a diet. I don't want to feel that way. I don't want to think that way. So we're going to talk about fueling. Like for, someone who's trying to gain weight, fueling might be 2 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and a big glass of milk. But for someone else, fueling might be like a granola bar and a banana. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter. It's about how you're going to fuel for your performance. So yeah, those are just some of the things that I think get overlooked sometimes when it comes to nutrition because everybody does want the Google answer. And I am not that person.
That's a really good way to put it because that's what we're used to, right? I have a question. I literally type it into Google and then the little blurb comes up at the top of what it should look like or what it should be. And no one ever clicks to get the context behind it, but it is, you said it like, it's either absolute one way or absolute the other way. And then you touched on another thing, and I want to bring up because I think this is what's really going to help people listening to this is this idea of building autonomy in the selection, right? Like I've always found in performance coaching, the more involved I can have the athlete in their training, whether it be adjusting based off of their feedback or giving them choice and selection and having them one step further, having them understand why, where, and how those choices play in. Right? Like instead of a barbell back squat today, maybe it's a rear foot elevated split squat, or we do switch the bar and use a safety squat bar or something, like have them involved with the decisions. It sounds like, you're coaching nutrition, you're coaching food choices. It can be very similar. How, if whether you're an athlete listening to this, a coach listening to this, a parent listening to this, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot on this one, so I apologize because I people listen to this. If you want a little pullback on the Parisi podcast, there's no prep. We're just having a conversation. We're just rolling with it. What are some ways to build in autonomy when it comes to food choices, right? Like or learning when you're learning about food or trying to have the conversation about food with someone. Building in autonomy or getting to that point, rather, maybe not starting with it, but getting to that point. Because I'm sure at some point people want like the list of options of great carbohydrates pre-practice, right? But then getting to the point of like, okay, choosing and choice. And that's a really important piece is getting to that selection.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is accessibility, honestly. And nice. This hit me really hard. We were talking to the football team, just kind of going over what next semester is going to look like. And we're going to start doing post-practice or post-workout recovery shakes. And I was just talking about like food has to be your other job. Like you're in the weight room and stuff, but eating and fueling has to be your other job. And I had one kid that said, well, what if you don't have the resources? And I was like, nailed it. I said, then you come and see, the football coach jumped in. He's like, never do we want anyone to have to deal with that or feel that they don't have the resources. So he's like, come talk to us and we will make sure that we take care of that. But that's huge. Like, and you have the typical strength coach. It's like eat grilled chicken and get your broccoli
rice and chicken.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then you can't tell every kid that if the kid is like, well, I'm going to go home and hope that there's bread. You know what I mean? So accessibility is absolutely number one. What is realistic for them? Maybe fast food is their only realistic option. And you happen to have, they get some, sort of food or cafeteria meals or whatever. And you can make that the best meal. And you can make that complete knowing that the rest of the day, you're just focusing on like, are they going to get enough for hydration from in the form of water, not Gatorade? What can you send them home with? Are there other families on the team that can help out? So, but as dumb as it sounds, that's definitely the number one.
No, that's what it is. It totally makes sense. I totally didn't cut you off there, but it's like,
no, you're good.
It's like in the weight room, right? Performance coaches, like the workout with the coach is probably going to be the most dialed in. But then outside of that, when we talk about recovery or soft tissue work or prep work, whatever they're doing on their own, like you got to give them something that they can do and be good at. And it's just funny how coaching, whether it's food, whether it's strength training, whatever skill, right? Like it all, I think we overthink it because it's something that's different outside of our bubble. Yeah. So, okay, I'll shut up now. I'm going to go back.
No, you're good. You're good. And then on the flip side, you'll have the kid that comes in and he's like, oh yeah, if I need anything, my grandma will go to the store and get it. And so you're like, all right, so you're going to be different. you know, you can totally make those adjustments based on the kid that you're talking to. But accessibility is the first thing. And I think ultimate goals too. You always get the kid that's trying to gain weight and suddenly they're eating like salads for every meal. And you're like, no. Just because you're trying to eat healthy, right? Quote unquote healthy doesn't mean you have to have a salad all the time. And if you're trying to gain weight and you're a hard gainer, I love the fact that you're going to try to eat more broccoli, but that 50 calories that's making you full is not actually really going to help us. Yeah. So I need you to load up on the potato, get more of the protein, have a little bit of vegetable, but we're going to get seconds on that other stuff, And so people don't like to hear that either because they want, again, the Google answer. And I'm like, it does, like multivitamins. That's where, food first is my approach and supplements have a place sometimes. And maybe that's it. But you just have to make it happen for each kid and meet that kid where he or she is at.
It's so funny how close, and I mean, my own bias, but like this relates so much to my own coaching philosophy on meeting someone where they're at and then making it something they can do and something they can be good at so they can have consistency with it. Yes. And, then magic happens when you're consistent. Like it's so funny how similar that is, but it is interesting because, in sports performance facilities and we often get like the questions. It's like, what should I do? How should I eat? And a lot of sports performance coaches are meatheads. So they're just like chicken, 8 ounces of this, 4 ounces. And it's like, and I think you said this earlier where it's like, at some point for a lot of kids and athletes, it's like, can you just get something in your mouth, like through an 8-hour school day. And then you got like the weird time after school before practice or before competition where you might just be hanging out in the library or somewhere with your friends for 90 minutes. Like, can you put it on the front burner for you to do? Can you make sure you're drinking water on competition days? Like, can you chill on the Red Bull or like, ancillary habits that maybe move you back? And maybe we can talk about that here shortly, like addressing bad habits or like things that kids inherently do because of convenience, or even I'm gonna say kids, but like everyone, right? Like right. I'm guilty. I'm sipping on a coffee at 2:00 in the afternoon here. And, like I wish I could say it'd be my last one, but it's not. And like how maybe you address when someone comes in, right? So maybe I'll paint the picture a little bit here. When someone comes in and they're like, you're working with them or you're talking to them and a couple little, we'll say red flags pop up and you're like, okay, like everything is about 80% what I want, but there's these couple little things that if we can minimize it or swap it, that you are maybe derailing or setting yourself back when you don't know it, because accessibility is totally another thing, but like health literacy is another animal that people have to tackle. How do you address those conversations with someone, kid, adult, whoever, that like, hey, you know what, you're actually doing this and it's sabotaging you. So maybe we can switch it up and do this instead, which is a tough combo for sure.
It can be. One of the things I like to do is ask them where they think they're going wrong. So I always do like 24-hour recall, right? And so we go through it and I'll say, all right, so if you had to pick where or what is probably not working for you, tell me what that would look like. And usually they know. And so it would be like, well, I don't eat enough for breakfast. Okay, cool. So let's talk about what are some options for breakfast. Like, do you like to sleep till the very last second and then you're like racing out the door? Would you be willing to give up 15 minutes and, spend some time like making a little bit of something? Do you have help? So I always want them to be able to recognize, instead of, because they're always being told, right? Like when we coach them, we're like telling them what to do, how many sets, how many reps, do this, do that. And so creating the opportunity for them to tell me what needs to be fixed, a lot of times that's when they're like, oh, yeah, that's what I could do, and then being, and a lot of times too, it's like they eat lunch and then they eat nothing until they get home at 7:00 at night. And I'm like, okay, so at what point of this 7 hours do you feel the hungriest? Because I know they feel hungry. But if I say, do you feel hungry? They're going to be like, no. So I just say, at what point in here are you the hungriest? Because I know you are. And they can recognize, it takes them a second, but they'll be able to start identifying some of those pitfalls and stuff that they have. Or I had one kid a couple weeks ago, it was before Thanksgiving, and he was trying to gain weight and we were talking about snacks. And I said, you come in here every day and you get 100-calorie pack of goldfish. Is that what you're counting as your snack? He's like, well, yeah. I said, you're huge. That's not even a snack for me. And I'm small. I said, so think about that. So for him, I said, all right, because he's more like, because he's eating like packaged snacks, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go calories here. I said, your goal is at least 2 500-calorie snacks a day. So I said, you can't come in here and get a pack of goldfish. And because he was like, well, I eat a Cliff Bar every day. All right. I said, all right, so you're going to go and you're going to buy some of the Jif to-goes, like the little peanut butter to-go packets. I said, and you're going to dip your Cliff Bar in it. Now you're closer to 500 calories. He was like, oh. So like sometimes you have to give numbers and absolutes because it helps with that light bulb moment.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm just one of those people that I want to ask 100 questions before I'm going to give one answer.
Well, it was really important. Like the description and the example you gave, like you're asking open-ended questions, right? Like, do you feel hungry? Yes or no. At what point do you feel hungry? Can't be answered yes or no. And in the weight room, like I think obviously the audience in this case is performance coaches. We're like, how'd that set feel? Good, bad? Or do you think, like, we always ask questions that require like minimal follow-up. Very few coaches actually like take the time in between sets to be like, or it's almost like we talk about absolutes like the other way, and it's like word vomit, and it's like, just shut up and get some weight on the bar and like get to work. Yes. But when you're having these questions, especially trying to curb pitfalls that you see athletes kind of portraying on themselves, those open-ended questions are just so important. Have you was that something that you guys like learned in school? Like, did you have to evolve to that point? Like, cause that's like legit coaching. That's not something that is typically taught in a classroom, is like the actual communication piece of the education to the application.
Yeah. I think for me, I learned a lot of those skills just doing eating disorder counseling, because there's such a huge psychological component to that. And it's not about food 99.9% of the time. So you have to ask so many questions to figure out like where this all started and how it began, and, how you're going to best approach the way to recovery and stuff like that. And honestly, I just really love people's stories. Like I love knowing like where people come from, like how they got to where they are. And so I think like however I can pick that apart, I do. So I just like to ask a lot of questions.
Especially with food, like,
it's fun.
Food is so much more like it absolutely is fuel. But, like when people make the transition from performance coaching of athletes, where it is fuel, to like the general adult, where it's social and it's fun and it's comforting and it's a reaction to stress, and like it's like, and it can be that way with athletes too. But and maybe this is a good question to ask, like when people go from I'm an athlete to I'm no longer an athlete, and I'm sure you've seen it at the high school level, you've definitely probably seen it at the adults that you've talked with and worked with, like how do you shift the I'm eating to be an athlete to I'm eating for just life? Like what components change? How do you address that? And like, where does that start for you?
Yeah. So when I was at the collegiate level with football, a lot of the seniors who knew they weren't going to go past collegiate, we would sit down around November and just teaching them about like, they're going to be hungry a lot because they're used to eating a lot, and just teaching them to be uncomfortable being hungry for a little bit to learn how to adjust to portion sizes, and different ways of eating for the rest of your life. So, and they would start that in November. So they would still have me there, to kind of help them get through some of those tough times. But it's hard, and it really is for a lot of them just changing portion sizes. And so, but I mean, when you're just used to eating all the time as much as you can, it is a huge adjustment. And I remember the swimmers, they would always really struggle during taper. They'd be like, I can't stop eating. And I'm like, I know, because it's such a habit. Like, you've been trained to do this for so long. And then one of the other things that I would always tell them is, you can't stop exercising. You may not ever want to put a bar on your back again, and that is 100% acceptable, but you have to find what you love now. Mm-hmm. And so whether that's, mountain biking or, I don't know, CrossFit or whatever you want to find, you cannot stop exercising, because that's going to get you in trouble. So, but yeah, we would have those conversations about cutting carbs at night, and maybe you're going to go to bed hungry for a few nights, just until your body adjusts and your stomach can kind of get back to what a normal, stomach is, and stuff like that. So
it's interesting. We'll have to do round 2 on this pod, because I feel like that's a whole episode in itself, adjusting to hunger.
Yes.
That's, it is interesting, and working with people through weight loss and things like that. It's bizarre how your body just tells you it's so routine. But anyway, that's, I think, another whole nother beast. Because I know you've got a hard stop here, and I have one more question I want to ask you, because I always find this question fascinating with people in industries that I don't fully understand. But in sports nutrition science, food science, however you phrase it in your brain, because I'm sure there's a lot of different ways to coin it. What excites you about either where it's going or what's coming up next in that industry?
Oh man, that is a huge question.
I know but it's fascinating. I find it fascinating because everyone brings their own individuality to it. For you, what's really cool and what you're kind of drawing your attention to?
I think for me, a lot of just I feel like anything from collagen to magnesium to zinc to beets, as far as a dietary nitrate and stuff like that, being able to, in creatine and brain health. Oh my gosh. I could go on and on.
That's huge too. That's a huge one.
Oh my gosh. So
creatine,
much.
the wannabe steroid in every parent's eyes, having amazing function for things outside of ATP and muscle energy function, huge research.
Yes. It's all I'm so excited to start it, and not even start it. I've been working on a lot of different stuff when I was in baseball, but taking this new group of athletes, at this level where parents are you have this knowledge. We want you to tell us what to give our kids and how to take care of our kids. Let's go. So I have all these plans for baseball season, what I want the baseball team to do. And then in off season, I want to try to get our football team to do omega-3s after workouts along with their recovery shakes. And so just picking apart some of that really sciencey, nerdy rabbit hole fun stuff, and just seeing what happens, because at the end of the day, it's all food based. So it's only going to benefit everybody. It's just, we don't know what it all looks like yet, because we've never really, I don't know, especially, and you know how this is, research is always on people 18 years and older. And so where is the really good quality research on youth athletes? There's just not. So
because they're not graduate students in the lab.
Right. And and you have to have parental consent and all that kind of stuff. But and if someone's not on campus 100% of the time, people aren't necessarily going to trust what's going on. But that's one of my things, is just how nerdy and geeky can I get with some of this stuff coming up. That
is, we'll definitely do round 2 if you're up to it, because I feel like there's so many good, just that last little bit, creatine, every parent will get, it's inevitable. I'm going to get the call or email from a parent being is my kid taking a steroid? And I'm listen, here's this research article, and this research article. it is so worth its weight in gold. And I think it's not as scary as it gets portrayed.
Right.
But you and I definitely should do like a rapid fire, like supplements only Q&A or something like that.
Oh my gosh.
It's the questions we get, right? And in sports performance land, like a lot of times we know it's not going to hurt you and it does have benefits. And I'm not talking about creatine, but like just supplementation in general,
right.
And if you can get it from food, it's preferred, but
right.
Like parents in the average consumer, like they get marketed to so hard that that's their people's jobs, but I digress. Allison, if people want more Allison Maurer, where do they go?
Oh man. Okay. Just for the record, I'm the worst at social media. So
okay.
I can never post.
I'll link it in the show notes for sure.
Yeah. But my Twitter and my Instagram is at PPR Fuel, Prepare, Perform, Recover Fuel. And then, that's really, if you want, I'll do better. I got to do better. I'm so bad about it.
You're going to get the Parisi podcast bump now. So you're going to have to level up for sure.
I will totally have to level up. I got to I'm old. Like I'm not good at it.
If it wasn't for the job I have with Parisi, I don't think I would be on any social media.
Yeah. One of the things, and just total like tangent, one of the things like being at the high school, like there's so many things I want to post, but I also know like kids are so hung up on how many likes and stuff they're going to get that I'm like, you know what? I don't want to add to them thinking like that's important to me too. So you know what I mean? So I'm trying to find that balance.
Absolutely. PPR Fuel. Okay.
Yeah,
putting that in the show notes. People should go check you out. Allison, if you're up for it, we'll do round 2 because I think you and I could probably, if we sat at a coffee shop with coffee in front of us, I think we could kill 3 hours easy, no problem.
And 3 pots of coffee.
Yeah, a lot of coffee. Thank you so much for joining. I look forward to an eventual round 2 for sure.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Casey. You have a good day.